Welcome to everyone who has already joined us. I'm just going to hit mute here so that we don't have any background noise, and then we'll get started. Perfect. Um, Welcome all to our information session for the Leadership and Society Initiative, where your next chapter matters. My name is Seth Green, and I'm grateful to welcome you to what is going to be a very full agenda. We are going to give you a snapshot of LSI, then we're going to go deep into the learning journey. We're going to talk about the timeline in details, and then we're going to answer your questions. And we're going to do so with a phenomenal group. So as I mentioned, I'm Seth. I'm the Dean of the Graham School here at the University of Chicago. And I have the wonderful joy of being the decanal sponsor of this initiative because while this is the University of Chicago Leadership and Society Initiative, and it involves every school and division of the university, we have the utter privilege of being the operational home for it here at the Graham School. And with that, I will turn it over to our phenomenal executive director of the initiative, Diana Petty, to tell a little bit about herself. Diana, can I invite you?
Yes, thank you so much, Seth. And thank you to all of you around the Zoom table with us for joining and taking time out of your Tuesday morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. And as Seth mentioned, I'm Diana Petty. I have truly the extraordinary privilege of being the executive director of the Leadership and Society Initiative. And I come to this role after just about a decade serving in city government in New York. So I worked in the Bloomberg administration doing civic tech initiatives and public-private partnership building. And it was really a formative time for me professionally, where that was where the spark of giving back, of serving society, and thinking about purpose-driven leadership really grow and grew and was developed for me. And I was so fortunate to be a part of several leadership development programs that really homed in on kind of like what are your talents, what's the change you're trying to create, and how can you kind of build an approach and a strategy at the intersection of your strengths and the way you want to strengthen communities. And so when I learned about the opportunity to work with leaders who are arguably at the pinnacle of their wisdom and thinking with a very specific kind of intention and precision about how they want to approach life and leadership and purpose in this chapter of their lives, I jumped at it and I pinch myself every day that I get to be a part of working with the incredible individuals who come through LSI. So looking forward to the conversation and just grateful to be here.
And then alongside Diana, we have two fellows who just finished the program at the end of May. Mike Zimmerman, can we ask you to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Diana. Great to be here. So wonderful to be here to speak a little bit about this great year that Jennifer and I just had. So I am recently retired Executive Vice President at ITW. ITW is a Chicago-based multinational manufacturing company. And as part of that, I had the opportunity to learn a whole lot about business and travel around the world. A great, great company, and I really enjoyed my time with them. I'm also the board chair for the Chicago Botanic Garden. I know not all of you are based in Chicago, but hopefully you get a chance to visit, whether you are or aren't. And just finished, Jennifer and I just finished our 1 year with the LSI design track, and it was absolutely wonderful and can't wait to share more.
Wonderful. And Jennifer, can we hear a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Vachon, a recovering healthcare executive with 30 years at Blue Cross Blue Shield. I retired as EVP of operations. And towards the latter half of my career, I did a lot of work on the social determinants of health, which coincided with me becoming involved on multiple community boards as my job was no longer filling my cup. And I knew I was ready to end my next chapter at Blue Cross Blue Shield, but I had no idea what to do next. And I'll leave it hanging there for the rest of the story.
All right, wonderful. We will re-pick up that story and we'll engage again with Diana, Michael, and Jennifer in a moment. I'm going to give you, in each of these sections, the kind of overview, and then we're going to come to hearing about their experiences in the program. So let's start on the snapshot. So if you're in this virtual room, you probably already know that LSI is a fellowship. It supports distinguished individuals like Michael and Jennifer in pursuing meaningful next chapters for themselves and for society. And it's typically at the point at which people are finishing a longstanding career moment. They may have another full career, or they may have an encore chapter, but it's at that moment of inflection that they typically lean into LSI as an opportunity to really think deeply with others about what's next and how to get there. There's two reasons we launched this initiative 3 years ago. And the first, if you're in this room, you may also know about, people are living longer. And what that means is that we are still seeing people retire or rewire at around the same age, meaning they're finishing that long-standing, sometimes corporate, sometimes other sector career arc in that same around, late 50s, early 60s, but they're now looking toward 90 if they haven't had a major health incident and they are at that moment in a strong place. And so they're saying, oh, I have a whole nother chapter of life that I want to pursue with purpose. And so part one is this longevity movement. We like to say it doesn't change old age, it changes every chapter of life, and it changes how you navigate life itself. The second big issue is that many of the great challenges that we face as a society today are highly systemic and interconnected. Think climate, think about income distribution, think about how we deal with polarization in society, and you've thought about massive issues that intertwine business and government and the social sector. And when you think about how we approach those, we need people with experience in systems who have extraordinary leadership to be able to bring that acumen and experience to bear on these most complex challenges. And really, LSI exists at the intersection of these two major trend lines. We want to help individuals who are living longer to really be able to live their purpose with that longer life. And then we want to activate their leadership for society. We see a huge pool of talent that can be activated to deal with many of society's most pressing challenges. And so that's why we built LSI. And let me now tell you what LSI is motivated to do, and then we'll talk about how we get there. We want every fellow to finish with what we call a purpose plan. And that's a plan for how, over the next chapter of life, they are going to live their why, meaning really understand what are those values and purpose that give meaning to your life. David Brooks and others are faculty members here where they're helping you to think about what do you want that legacy to be that you leave behind? How will you feel fulfilled at a deep level in having made a difference in the world? And why is that motivational to you? Then we want to think about the what, meaning, is there a specific societal issue, whether through private industry, whether through social sector, whether through another intervention that you want to make a difference on? We often describe this as having this hunger and then knowing where you want to direct it. And then finally, there's the how, meaning what are the specific ways and pathways for you to actually take action in a way that you find meaningful on an issue that matters to you. And so that is the big goal. But rather than me tell you about this journey, I thought it would be better to pause here and talk with the individuals who are actually on this journey. And so, Mike and Jennifer, can I start with you? We just talked about the LSI Fellowship ending with a vision for the future. And so I'm hoping each of you can share a brief snapshot of your current vision for your next chapter, and then maybe talk a little bit about how LSI helped you get there. And Jennifer, can we start with you this time?
Sure. As I said, I knew I was ready to end my career at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Had started to get very involved on a couple of community boards. And so for me, kind of thinking about the next chapter, I had this vague notion that I wanted to be a lot more impactful around the root causes and social determinants of health, and in particular, food security. I'd started to get very involved with an organization in Chicago called the Greater Chicago Food Depository. So I had that notion coming in, and that was it. I had no idea what that meant or how to move on that or how to activate on that. And for me, LSI was kind of monumental in terms of helping me move that kind of vague notion, not just to a vision, but actually acting on it. For me, just so you all know, what that next chapter is looking at like right now, as Seth said, things evolve. But there's actually 3 of us from our program that just ended that came together and formed a partnership. And it really was around what we learned out of this, really kind of going deep into some of the societal issues. And like we each had a vague notion, me for food security, another person in our program around affordable housing, and another one around job training. As we started to really kind of unpack, both through our classes and through kind of our extracurriculars, I'll call them, how intertwined those all were. And the opportunity to kind of come together and address the root causes of all 3, because they really are so intertwined, having a place to live, having a thriving wage to enable you to get out of the need for emergency food access. We came together, and our vision is to support community leaders who already in their own communities have identified kind of community food hubs as a priority, and we are going in and helping them realize their vision. And so we're actually working, the 3 of us right now, with a community leader in Englewood. He has bought a abandoned school, has raised 12 million. I brought in the food depository to open up a market in the bottom. And the 3 of us now are helping him fill out what are the rest of the services, how to get access to affordable housing in Englewood, how to set up job training programs in Englewood. And it's happening. We were just in a 4-hour meeting on Friday with the community leaders in Englewood. So again, that never would have happened, I'm absolutely convinced, without the structure and the discipline and the insights throughout the last year.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for sharing. I just want to say for the group that the others involved, one was a major real estate attorney for DLA Piper, and the other, one of the executives at IBM. And so, you described them beautifully as now being about workforce and the, woman who ran a large part of IBM, and then about affordable housing. Those were both experiences that they brought, but also their ability to transform during this year to really take their incredible skill set, right? Leading a huge organization, being one of the key attorneys on real estate development, but then transform those into the private sector for social good over the course of this year. So just a great example of all 3 of you making that transition and now being a partner to this leader in Englewood, who is incredibly accomplished himself, but doesn't have necessarily that same private sector background to be able to leverage all of these capital resources. Mike, can we talk about your experience and your purpose plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Jennifer and her 2 partners are doing is absolutely remarkable. And Jennifer is very humble, so she undersold that she is actually the board chair of the Chicago Food, or either incoming or actual. I forget the timing, and is on a bunch of other boards. Her social, well, her bona fides on this are amazing. So I've settled on 2 different paths, and I had a lot of ideas coming in, and I wanted to just keep myself open to anything, because you see lots of great opportunities through this program. I'll speak of one, and maybe if there's time, I'll hit on the other. So I came into LSI as being on a social sector board, and then I met people like Jennifer, and I saw their commitment to not-for-profit or social sector organizations. So we had 20 people in our group, in our cohort in design, 20 people. And we did a survey about halfway through as we kept getting awestruck about what people were doing. We found out that we had 42 different board seats among those 20 people on not-for-profits. I mean, some people had for-profit board seats too, but focusing on not-for-profit. So of the 20 people, we had 42, and there were some of us who hadn't yet found their way on a board, which is absolutely fine. So the average among the people who had was multiple board seats. And we had 13 people in our group who were either board chairs, about to be board chairs, or board chairs in the past of social organizations. And then we looked at the larger LSI group, the alumni. It's only been around 3 years. There have been 60 alumni in the one platform. There'll be more alumni in both, a few months from now. And of the 60 people who'd been through, there were 92 board seats currently, not-for-profit board seats in some of the biggest, most important organizations in the country and in lots of community-based work. So I was struck by this. I said, how can we harness the power of this network to make the not-for-profits that we care about better, to help do placements to some degree? Because what not-for-profit board you may be on is a lot of it is an accent of who you know. And that may work or it may not work. So how can we make this a little bit better? How can we sponsor education for people who are on not-for-profit boards? How can we do for not-for-profit boards what organizations like the NACD do for for-profit boards? And how can we use the power of the LSI fellowship to be the engine for improving the social sector organizations that those of us who are in the LSI community care a lot about. So we formed a group that I've been taking the lead on with a lot of help from Jennifer and others called the Social Sector Board Catalyst. And it's LSI based. It's open to the whole LSI community. And we're really just getting it going, but it's pretty exciting. So let me stop there.
And I'll just
Wonderful.
jump on that if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful for me of I don't know, the community of LSI. Mike kind of had this idea, brilliant idea, because I actually think it's could be core to LSI, and kind of not only just spearheaded, but kind of embraced so many of us to be part of that, to be part of the formation and bringing it to life. So again, I just wanted to highlight that because while I personally came into this program thinking, okay, we're each going to have our, here's my next chapter. So much of this, as you just heard from both of us, is intertwined with others in the cohort. And Mike's been a beautiful example of how that next chapter also involves all of LSI.
Well, and so Diana, can we come to you? We just heard two purpose plans. You've often said if you've heard, two, you've heard two because they're totally, even though intertwined, they're unique in their own way. You've now overseen more than 60 fellows in completing the program. There are 40 more right now that are on their journey. And so they are partway through their purpose plan. So across 100, are there any emerging kind of through lines that you see? Tell us about the spectrum of different types of purpose plans.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly comment that, as Mike mentioned, we're in our kind of fourth year of cohorts, and it has been so extraordinary to give this type of leader a frame and a sandbox in which to play and create and explore and discover. And the ways in which, you hear from Jennifer and Mike, the ways in which they're taking those ingredients, they're really leaning into the power of the peer process and the expertise that is within their cohort. And they're just like blowing it wide open in ways that we never, when Seth and I sat down to think of this, could have imagined. And so that has been just an absolutely profoundly life-changing thing to witness. And so before I get to the continuum of kind of what we see people think about as they're building their capstones, I want to start with how we see people entering the process. And there's essentially three unifying factors that we think kind of bring people into the LSI Fellowship. The first is that they are at some form of inflection point, whether that's professional or that's personal, or they see it forthcoming on the horizon and they kind of sense it is, approaching. And that it is like they kind of are connected to that inflection point and want to be intentional about how they move through it. That's part one. Part two is that they are motivated by society. You hear this with Jennifer and Mike so deeply. It is universal across LSI Fellows that they are raising their hand and saying, you know what, I'm energized. I think I have things to offer, but I really want to be, again, precise about how I'm deploying my built wisdom, the assets that I have in places where it's most needed. And I want to think through that and like do some assessment to make that determination. And then finally, and it was actually fellows who gave us this language, a common quality across LSI fellows is that they're intellectually curious and really want to dedicate some time and space to learning, to exploring, to experimenting, to expanding, their exposure to new research, to new ideas, to new evidence, because they believe that that will help them really clarify and step forward with greater confidence. So I name those three unifiers because across essentially every other measure, LSI fellows are unique and diverse and distinct from one another. And that is also part of the beauty. And the University of Chicago is really a place that believes that diversity of ideas coming into contact with each other is where breakthrough thinking happens. And so the fellows are not only distinct in terms of the expertise and backgrounds that they bring into the cohort, but also the nascent ideas and, intentions they have for their next chapter. And so by virtue of that diversity and plurality, it's no surprise that we see a very wide range of ideas coming out of the fellowships and the capstone projects. And we've started to sort of think of it on an X and Y axis grid in a way in which the X axis is really their what and the Y axis is their how. And the bookends on the what are we have some fellows who are really focused on an issue that is driving them or calling them forward. And you think of any issue number under the sun, there is an LSI fellow who's thinking about it, right? You have Jennifer talking about housing security, food security, economic opportunity. We have folks working on gun violence. We have folks working on bolstering democracy. Mike has dabbled in climate and energy and, renewables. But they're identifying that domain area, if they can even help move the needle in the slightest way in this next stage of their leadership, they're going to derive a sense of purpose and enrichment and fulfillment. And that's really kind of the through line for them. On the other end of that kind of what continuum is people who are really focused on bringing their wisdom out in new and different ways and open to applying that in a variety of different contexts for a variety of different ends. So those people, their realizations throughout the fellowship are largely, you know what? I think if I reinvest in my own kind of knowledge, my own growth, my own development, my relationships, my community, that's going to position me to be the most impactful leader that I can be in this moment. So we have those folks go on to a lot of people writing books. We've had several first-time authors come out of the cohorts, people who are teaching and kind of uplifting the next generation of talent and leaders. And also those who are really just trying to play a stronger role in their neighborhoods and their communities and changing the lives of the people around them for the better. And then the last bit I'll say is that a big question that comes up from fellows, and I wasn't expecting this, and it took some while to get clarity around it, is one of scale. And so that's what is on that Y axis around the how. And so we do have some fellows who go on to think about big macro level systems change, changing the flow of capital, doing policy advocacy, really thinking about root causes, the intersections of different issues. And that's where they want to spend and dispel their energy and their efforts and their abilities. But then we have others who are like, you know what? If I can make the difference in the lives of 5 people and really help them, achieve their own dreams, that's where I can be purpose driven and that's where I can contribute in a really intentional way. And for us, like seeing this range has been so rewarding. And because we see our role as one of helping fellows define for themselves what is purpose, what is impact, where can I contribute? And so it's been wonderful to see people really leave with greater confidence and clarity around like how they're defining those measures for themselves in this stage. So I'll stop there. That was a lot for me.
Well, I'm going to come back to Diana, Michael, and Jennifer throughout, but I'm going to now move us into the next part of this presentation, which is about the learning journey that brings you to the purpose plans that Michael, Jennifer, and Diana have just described. So we have a 3-part learning pedagogy at LSI. And the first pillar is know oneself. And this is about really looking inside first to what are the values that you have noticed that drive you in your past that you want to carry you into your future. And this is where we have humanists who are using classic text and looking at how people across time and space have answered the big questions of why am I here and what is my purpose that I want to serve. And we have incredible education and leadership kind of faculty at Booth School who are working with you as an executive and helping you to really reflect on moments in your career where you felt the greatest levels of purpose and unpack what was it about those moments that gave you joy and meaning. And together, we're hoping that that really can give you that internal compass for what you want to drive you at this stage. One of the things that faculty member David Brooks talks a lot about is that when you enter your careers, you enter with motivation and you are driven internally, but then you enter a system that has a lot of extrinsic rewards. So I become a dean because I'm really passionate about expanding educational opportunity. When I'm in this seat, I kind of know what I need to do every day because I have a budget and I know what it looks like to be excellent in terms of managing that. I know what it looks like to raise awareness and get media attention for our school. I know what it looks like to get enrollments. Those are all wonderful things. But as I get to a place where I may not have that same need or system around me, right? How do I look within and say, what's motivating me? And if you've spent 30, 40 years being really excellent in a system, it's not that you don't have that intrinsic motivation anymore, but it may be that you're not as closely in touch with it as you may have been in the past. So how do you reconnect with that and really think deeply about what it is that's going to bring you joy and meaning at this stage of life? The second pillar is understand the world, really looking analytically at the big issues in society. And we have a unique methodology here that is very UChicago. We do not believe that there are right answers. We believe there are important ways of thinking. And what we want to inculcate is helping you how to think more deeply. And for us, that means giving you different lenses on the world. So we have an economist, we have a sociologist, we have policy people. They will look at the same issue and they will have wildly different views on how to handle that issue. So an economist might look at the issue of crime and they will look at data and they will say, look, if you prosecute more, here's the data, you have a deterrent effect. Then we'll have a sociologist here who won a MacArthur Genius Award, who's written a book about how prosecution in certain contexts leads to this pipeline and a recidivist culture that creates many new problems. They will not agree on how to handle issues. We do not tell you there is a right answer. What you're going to do is you're going to look at all these different lenses, and two things are going to happen. One, you're going to sharpen your own views, and second, you're going to understand others better. And I would say on the whole, we do not find people, although it may happen, that totally change their perspective. You know, Michael and Jennifer are two examples of individuals who had business leadership as their prior experience before coming to LSI. My hunch is that they still may often see the world with an economist lens. But now they're in a room with people that have spent their whole lives in the social sector or in policy, and they'll have learned about these issues from a sociologist and a policy person. And when they say, no, I don't think we should prosecute, they won't say, oh, I've looked at the data, I know the right answer. They'll say, oh, I have this perspective, but here's how this person may look at this issue. And so it makes it much more possible for individuals to have collaboration because you're able to take on multiple lenses and you may still have a point of view, but you're able to work with others from other points of view. And a hallmark of the University of Chicago is that we want to promote intellectual flexibility and openness and the ability to see things from many different perspectives because we think that it sharpens your perspective on the world. And then finally, the final pillar is envision the future. And that's actually taught by practitioners. And it's people, for example, from the major executive search firms that are talking about how do you get onto corporate boards? How do you have effective leadership on social sector boards? People thinking about how you might have involvement in different ways in this chapter in terms of a startup or potentially getting involved in strategic philanthropy. And then how you can have wellness and healthy aging at this stage of life and really make sure that your body and your mind are in the best place to be able to advance the impact that you're seeking. So those are the learning pillars, and the way that is placed into the curriculum is that in each quarter, if you are in the design pathway, that is a full course that you're taking that is within that pillar, and then there's a specific subject that you're pursuing within knowing yourself better, for example. Alongside that curriculum, we then have an executive coach. That's someone working with you on the preparation for your leadership for this next chapter. So for example, if you want to write that corporate board bio, if you want to prepare yourself to put yourself forward for different opportunities, and if you want to think about what does wellness look like at this stage in your life. You have an academic advisor who's helping you to investigate the societal issue that you want to more deeply impact. And then we call them a distinguished mentor. You're already distinguished if you're coming to LSI. So what's different about this group? They're 10 years typically into their next chapter. So it's someone who has lived the experience that you are now embarking on. And we try to match based on the specific interest that you have. So for example, in this last cohort, someone who was really interested in service, we matched with the person who, in their next chapter, they became the head of AmeriCorps for the country after a long career at JP Morgan Chase, because they really understand what it's like to make that transition and to have that next chapter, so can advise on how to do it. Most importantly, all of this is in a cohort, and that cohort is what makes this experience so special. And we should put up the latest cohort. So Michael and Jennifer, I'm sorry your photo is not on here, but we are very fortunate to have 3 extraordinary cohorts that so far, and we'll keep our fingers crossed, the number 4 will continue this, have really built deep, lifelong friendships alongside being each other's best advisors. We pride ourselves at the University of Chicago. We have the most Nobel Prizes as an institution. We have great faculty. But when asked what makes LSI so valuable, at the end of each survey, we have 3 cohorts. And so far, all 3 have said overwhelmingly one another, that the number one benefit of this program is the peers. Obviously, we believe it's because we're facilitating an environment through our faculty where that peer interaction can be really meaningful and wisdom in the room can be successfully shared and built upon. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons we are so thoughtful in the selection process is we want people who not only are going to benefit, but are going to benefit others in the process. And I'll just say that the other really important peer or partner in this is your partner. And so if you are going to go through this program and have a partner, something that you should know is that they are invited in a number of moments into the LSI experience, because if you're going on this journey, it's important that they are on this journey with you and that they are a part of your process to discern what's next. But here again, I should not be the one telling you all about this. We have experts in the room. And so let me start, Diana, the time with you. I talked about a lot of elements. Can you just briefly talk as executive director, what do you see as the greatest strengths of the experience?
Yeah, so I'll offer that within that 3-part learning container that Seth just described, there's a few elements that we intentionally try to balance that we think are really effective to facilitating the learning process for the cohort. And the first is balancing that shared cohort learning process with opportunities for individualization and customization, right? So you are in classes that you share with your peers. They're exclusively designed for LSI Fellows. And that's really gives everyone sort of a common language, a common base of understanding, and a common terrain of exploration, right? You heard Jennifer share that she and the 2 other fellows she's now partnering with, it was them being able to take some of the concepts they were exploring in their core classes together and sort of apply them in their own domains and their own thinking that helped kind of surface this concept for their new collaboration, which is extraordinary. So we have that, but we want to make sure, because fellows come in with such a wide array of interests and things that they want to accomplish in their fellowship year, we want them to be able to gravitate towards things that are really unique to them. That certainly happens through their one-on-one coaching. That happens through individual course selections. They have, we're so proud, Seth mentioned this, that LSI really is a gateway to all the assets of the university. And so they can go to centers and institutes. They can meet with different faculty. So we found that juxtaposition of having that collective journey with opportunities for really shaping and curating what matters most to individual fellows has really been a sweet spot. The second sweet spot we try to harmonize is the philosophical and the practical in the learning process. And actually, an inaugural fellow gave me this Albert Einstein quote that I think really encapsulates this, which is, so Einstein said, "If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And I think that really encapsulates a mindset that is very core to the University of Chicago, which is that if you reframe and think conceptually and theoretically about ideas, the path forward might naturally reveal itself. And so that's where that kind of philosophical thrust in LSI comes from. And we are asking fellows to really suspend the need to know the answers in a lot of their coursework and just to interrogate at the conceptual level different ideas, different possibilities. And that is easier said than done because, as you can see from Jennifer and Mike, these are people who are incredibly good at getting things done. And it's made them very successful. It's allowed them to contribute significantly in their leadership. And so asking them to just think about, in theory, how might this work, I think is a really positive thought exercise. But because we know they're biased to action, we do want them to have experiential learning that helps them think about, okay, well, how do I apply these ideas and these concepts in the real world? So, as Seth mentioned, they learn quite a bit from practitioners who are on the kind of front lines of driving change in the private and social sectors. They understand best practices. And more than that, many of our practitioner instructors think about, like, where is the field moving? How can we anticipate new innovations? How can we think about how climate, how AI, how other changes might, affect the future, and how that might inform your own choices as you step forward. So that area of balance has also been a central focus for us. And then the final I'll offer, and it's been a learning curve for us as a fellowship, and Jennifer and Mike can add their color commentary on this. But we try to balance rigor with opportunities for fun and for joy and for levity. For those of you who are not familiar with the University of Chicago, our loving mantra is that it is the place where fun goes to die. And that is said with pride because it speaks to the seriousness with which everyone who is a part of our community takes the learning process, takes critical inquiry, and takes analytical thinking. And so we want to honor that because it is really core to how we move through ideas, how we move through a learning journey. But we learned very much from the fellows themselves that when you're trying to think creatively about a transition, about reshaping parts of your life and where you want to apply your efforts, you need space not only to be playful and creative because it unlocks better ideas, but also that joy fuels the deep connections, the trust, the bond building, the relationships that the cohort create together and allows them to be key partners, collaborators, thinkers with one another. And one thing that I've loved so much about watching LSI Fellows is that as they're ideating throughout the year, they are both each other's greatest champions and each other's greatest critics in, like, the most generative and productive way, right? Like, fellows will be the first to step in and tell each other, like, hey, I really think you can do that idea when they're having moments of doubts. And also the first to step in and say, I really don't get what you're talking about, but I want to, and I want you to succeed, and I'm in your corner, and let's think it through together. And so I think that having space for joy, for fun, for getting to know each other as humans really enables that deepened learning for everyone.
Well, and so Mike and Jennifer, can we hear about what it was like for you? I mean, you had been out of the classroom for maybe a few years in between when you came back for LSI. And so talk about what was it like to be back in the classroom? What elements of these did you find most helpful in your journeys? And just, talk about the overall experience of being on campus and being a part of this community. Mike, can we start with you?
Oh, sure. Excuse me. If I had to say it in one word, I'd say fun. Fun didn't go to die for me. Every day was fun. And also so engaging. Really, really awesome. And we spoke about the cohort, we spoke about the university. Our leaders, Diana and Seth, are world class. I don't want to embarrass them by saying more than that, but they've had a huge, huge impact on our experience. Uh, in the design pathway, there's two different types of classes. There's really a full load of college level classes that you do with your cohort. And then there is the ability to take classes outside the university and auditing them, graduate classes and or undergraduate classes. I had so much fun in every one. I mean, I've been to college, I've been to graduate school. When I went to college and graduate school, there was a fair amount of pressure. I had to do well to be on the path that I thought I needed to be on, not to mention student loans. To not to be here really for learning's sake and learning's sake only was such a gift and so wonderful. And then the in-between times. I love all the classes, even the ones that I wouldn't have chosen on my own, even the ones that maybe I didn't love every book. I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the discussions. I enjoyed seeing the perspectives from others. The audit classes were joyful. Interacting a little bit with the rest of the university was so much fun, and really it helped me think about my next chapter. And then with the cohort, I mean, we had a lot of, we are great friends now, and I would trust any member of the cohort with any. I mean, let's say I had something really, really serious that I needed to talk about that would affect my life. Anyone I would trust with anything. They are great advisors. They are great friends. We have a lot of fun together. I expect I've made 20 lifelong friends. I hope I don't mess it up, Jennifer. You'll tell me if I do. And we are very, very lucky. And since I am, and this is all genuine. And if you want to reach me without the, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can know that this is from the heart. Let me
Thanks,
stop
Mike.
there.
Jennifer, about your experience, how would you describe it?
Mike, he just described it perfectly. A couple things I would just add on to that. One, Mike's underselling kind of the role he played in these audit classes. I would walk across campus with Mike, and I'm not kidding. I would say every other walk across the campus, Mike would be able to say hi to another student. The way, he connected with students across the university. And that for me was something I did not expect. The audit classes was like, I don't know, was like a nice add-on that was part of the program. They were fantastic, both in terms of really being able to explore. I went to an arts leadership. I took an arts leadership course in the Booth School. I mean, things I was an economics major undergrad that I am interested in, never thought I'd be soaking it up with students, both undergrad and grad students. So that was a really unique experience that I didn't expect. The other, I would say, I've decided education is wasted on the young. When I think about what I did not take advantage of when I was in undergrad and grad school, I've made up for it. I'm calling them the extracurriculars, the centers, the institutes. The Institute of Politics for me was one I went to almost every single offer that they had, which were speakers and panels and journalists. It was fantastic. So this soaking up what the university has to offer was another piece. I went to University of Chicago as a grad student. I kind of thought I did that. I did not do it, and it was a special part that I didn't expect, as was the cohort. As Mike said, approaching 60 with 20 new best friends is intense, wonderful experience. And what's curated from the beginning at the orientation, this very purposeful experiences to bring joy. Mike's word was fun. Mine's joy. I actually moderated a panel at our capstone and asked everyone to kind of say the one word. And for me, it was joy in terms of how I described that the past year. So I could go on and on, but I will turn it back to you, Seth, in case there's any other specific places or questions around the last year that you want to have us talk about.
Well, I want to certainly talk more with all three of you, but I'm going to save it for Q&A to make sure we get a few minutes for everyone to ask questions. I just want to walk through now what are two pathways within LSI, because until this moment, we have had three graduations of what you see here as the design pathway. And I'll describe that in a moment, but it's what Michael and Jennifer have been a part of. It is the immersive version of LSI, where you are here for an academic year, and you are in it and you are deep. And what happened over those first 3 years is lots of people said, I want to go through this journey, but either I'm still in my career and I want to plan before I hit that moment, or I've maybe moved back a bit. Now I'm executive chairman versus CEO, but for family, for work, for my many board commitments, I can't commit to what is nearly a full-time program like design. Is there a way that I could get the executive MBA version of this curriculum? And we came out with what we call the Imagine pathway, which is the same methodology. Know oneself, understand the world, envision the future. You have the coaching and the other resources, but it is delivered in a compact format where you do 4 4-day retreats, one each quarter of the calendar year. Plus, you are invited optionally to lots of other experiences with the design cohort so that you can dip into those as your schedule allows. And so what you see here is the numbers and details behind these 2 cohorts. So design we consider to be fully in person. It is academic year based. In total, there are 95 days where we deliver instruction because there are 3 10-week quarters. And in those 3 10-week quarters, we have 3 days, Monday to Wednesday, where we deliver. And then there's some additional days for what you'll hear is an international travel study experience. And then there are 360 formal instructional hours. Although when you hear about Jennifer and Michael's experience, there are many, many more hours that people are going beyond the formal instruction. Compare that on the left to the Imagine pathway. We call that hybrid, although it is overwhelmingly delivered in person because we heard from the target audience, all of you, that you wanted to be with one another and building community. So you meet for 4 days at a time, Thursday to Sunday, once each quarter, starting at the end of January and then April, July, and October. And in between, you are doing homework because there's a plan that you are working on. You are meeting one-on-one with your coach, and you're meeting with a couple of other fellows who are your progress partners who we've paired you with to continue to make progress on your plans. So you do not sit in class on a Zoom of 25 people ever in Imagine, because we heard that is not how people want to engage. But in between being in person, you do have moments where you're continuing to move the ball forward, but there should never be more than 2 or 3 others in that Zoom room with you. So you're really still able to build meaningful relationships. In terms of what it looks like from a delivery experience, it's the same curriculum. The audits are if you're here on campus because you need to be here for those audits in person. So that's design. You are a UChicago student either way, receiving email, all of those pieces. You are working toward the same capstone. You're getting executive coaching. You are part of a cohort experience. The design does have, because we have more time, additional bells and whistles. We partner with the Aspen Institute. They run a really powerful 3.5-day seminar using classic text to look at leadership and how to advance your values. You do go abroad. Last year, it was constitutional democracy was the subject, and you were able to explore that in the UK. And they actually went on the half of a dinner that was organized by an MP just for them at the House of Lords, and got to see into, I mean, really some extraordinary experiences. They got to meet with arguably the most important columnist in the UK, who is also a professor at Oxford. And so those are experiences that are part of design. You're fully immersed in the campus. On the other hand, for Imagine, the obvious benefit you get is extreme flexibility and integration with a full-time career or full-time life. And then you also have your lodging fully included. So for people that are usually part of design, and most people come from outside Chicago, you are finding a residence here. For Imagine, we provide the lodging. It's at the Study Hotel, which is a beautiful facility right on campus and next to where we then run the retreats themselves. In terms of what you end up with, we do want to acknowledge that because of the time that you're investing, we consider these to be both in the same direction of purpose planning, but we describe them slightly differently in terms of the end product. Where in Imagine, you're getting what we call your compass. What you're really clarifying is what are those motivations and what are those decision criteria you want to use for discerning what's next, and what are the potential pathways. we consider what you get in design. And you heard Jennifer and Michael describe quite detailed plans that they've developed and now we're activating. We describe that as a roadmap. In addition to knowing those values and your decision criteria, you are actually putting together almost a business plan for what's next and then presenting that plan at the end. To be clear, there are people who can go really deep using the Imagine curriculum and still get there, but it is not naturally structured into the curriculum at the same level because we are seeing you for less time in total. And then I'll just say that this all ends in the same place. When you finish, you are a fellow for good, and we mean that in both senses of the word. You are part of what we call the LSI Alliance. That is an alliance of all the people that have completed the fellowship. You are still referenced as fellows, and you are invited back to many activities, including the welcome dinner each year, the immersion days where you go deep on a societal issue. And then the last year, and again this year, we've invited fellows with a small expense. I think it was like $500 just for administration of it, to also participate in the travel study experience. So they were able to be part of the UK as well. And this upcoming year, it'll be in Paris. So that is a bit about the learning journey. Let me now just briefly say, for those who are interested, you have seen these qualifications. We're looking for people that have 2 decades of senior level experience, significant accomplishment, most importantly for the University of Chicago, a willingness to engage in deep, rigorous, and respectful open exchange. We really value people coming from different perspectives, and we encourage people to share perspectives that are provocative for the sake of learning from one another. We want you to have a proven commitment to society that will look very different for different people, because you may have had a corporate career, but there are ways in which you may have been able to volunteer, or even in your essay write about the passions that you have. And then finally, a compelling vision for how participation in LSI could support your next chapter. The next steps, if you're interested, we're enrolling admissions right now and are close to filling our candidates for the 26-27 years. You would fill out a candidacy form that's really just biographical information. Then, if invited, you would fill out a full application and then come forward for an interview. We should say that there is a cost, but we really want you to apply if you're interested, because we do have scholarship resources available, and those allow us to make sure that we can make this accessible to individuals who have a wide array of accomplishment and build a cohort composition that reflects our society. And so Michael and Jennifer both came out of private industry. About 2/3 of the cohort come from that background, but about 1/3 come from the social sector as well as policy. We also have academics, we have architects, we have doctors. So we really want this to represent the full gamut of accomplishment. And with that, I will turn it over to questions. We have about 5 minutes with apologies, but we will make sure to get as many questions as we can. And certainly Diane and I can stay after for individual questions. So let's hear from you. 3 ways to ask questions. You can open your chat and put a question in there. You can, I'm going to unmute, so anyone who wants to can just shout out your questions. Perfect. You should be able to now ask questions should you want to. And then you can also use on the bottom, you press that react button, and then you can press raise hand. So any of those work, and I'll open it up. Go for it, Vanessa. Oh, but we don't hear you yet, but you should be able to unmute. There we go. Perfect. You're unmuted.
Okay, yeah. Now it just allowed me to unmute myself. So good morning, good afternoon. I arrived a little later after the program had started. So for clarity purposes, is this something that you manage keeping your full-time gig, so to speak, or is it a hiatus, a sabbatical, so to speak? I wasn't clear on it.
Yeah.
Again,
no, actually, you are right in both cases. So
okay.
if you want to keep your full-time career and begin planning for what may be next, the Imagine pathway is set up for exactly that use case. If you want to have the experience that Michael and Jennifer have described of really being embedded at the university, and even though you're called a fellow and you do contribute to the university, and that's why we give that designation, you are in many ways going back to be a student in a semi full-time capacity. That is typically when you are beyond your primary career. We have had people that completed while they're still holding roles like executive chairman, or they still have responsibilities like they maybe moved to half-time or they're in a phased retirement. But you're not at the climax of your career because it would be too much to do the design and a full-time career simultaneously, if that's helpful.
It was. Thank you so much for answering the question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question to clarify and one that many have. So thank you for asking. Other questions? Go for it, Yushi.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is helpful. So just a quick question around timeline for decision making. I know for the next cohort, it's January to December of 27. At what point would, candidates know that, they've been, approved or something? And then for the program fees, I didn't see anything. I know a
Yep.
few people might want to, apply for scholarships or waivers. At what point, do we know if that's been approved as well?
Right. Yeah, Diana, do you want to take those?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in with that. So, right now we're enrolling admissions. And so we're essentially reviewing and progressing candidates around every 2 weeks. And so, in total, right now, enrolling admissions, from when you start to when a decision is made is around a month. So, if you submit your candidacy today, it's July 21st. By the end of August, you would have a result of the admissions process and the review. In terms of applying for a scholarship, that happens in your submission of your application. There's a short essay where you are asked to provide some information to be reviewed for a merit award. And so that is easily and seamlessly packaged within your application submission. And you would get a notice on the determination of a scholarship as part of your offer of admission. Those two things come concurrently.
Any other questions that you have? We want to be respectful of your time. Great. Well, this is actually a perfect time to end since it's 10:59 on my clock. But let me suggest this. Diana and I are willing to stay after. So we're going to say class dismissed. But if you have a specific question to you, we can create little breakout rooms. We can talk to you individually to make sure we get your questions answered. So let me close with a huge thank you to Jennifer and Michael for being such great ambassadors for LSI. And Diana and I will hold, but everyone else, we will say goodbye for now and look forward to maybe seeing you as candidates in the process, and even better, maybe seeing you on our gorgeous campus.